Head into your Wednesday with, again, quite a bit of sunshine for the rest of the day with those near average highs. I've got details on that incoming system. What's beyond that coming up.
All across western Montana, recycling plastic has become increasingly difficult. In fact, some areas have stopped even trying altogether. And it really is a problem everywhere that begins with that half-full ketchup bottle and other contaminants people mistakenly throw into their recycling bins. MTN's Augusta McDonald has been checking into the story.
This is all material that we actually pulled out of our cardboard recycling. So while there is confusion about plastic bags and things like bubble wrap, this is definitely not cardboard.
China used to import much of U.S. recycled plastics, but have largely closed their doors to it now.
They're overwhelmed with the amount of plastic, and so they can be very, very choosy. They can ask that it come to them in a very usable format. And really, just sort of backing up a bit, you know, the loads used to be so contaminated. They were finding hazardous waste, special waste, in addition to food waste.
Poor recycling practices helped create the glut of plastics in the United States now that have lost their value and have few markets to be sent to, especially if they're lower quality plastics.
But here recently, over the last year, China in particular has reduced, restricted, limited both the types of recyclables they'll accept, and the markets have really become very difficult to find a buyer. So really, one of the things we say is our ability to pick up residential recycling is always contingent on having an end market for it to go to.
Plastics recycling is very labor intensive, and for landlocked states like Montana, involves shipping costs to their next location for processing. If the product isn't worth anything at the end market, companies end up operating at a loss. Republic Services offsets the costs associated with plastics recycling by charging a fee for their curbside pickup program. Another Missoula materials processing company is having similar problems. At Pacific Steel and Recycling, they've posted signs at the drop-off center warning people that due to the amount of contamination that's ending up in these bins, they could have to discontinue their free service.
The cleaner it is, the more the more it's going to be worth. The better quality, one type of material. It's going to be really easy to market. If it gets contaminated, and I don't know that there's really a threshold, but if it gets too contaminated, we can't even sell it. We can't even find a market for it. So then it would end up going to the landfill, which is something that we try to avoid here.
Montana Department of Environmental Quality officials say the solution is to think about your recyclables as a product, not as trash.
Just recycling, in general, it's not a feel-good thing. You can't just say, well, I'm doing this for the sake of recycling. You got to realize that we're recycling because these materials have a value, and they will no longer have a value if we recycle it wrong or we have a contamination factor.
She says that statewide, the drop in the value of plastics has left some rural places in a lurch. The volunteer group that heads up recycling efforts in the Bitterroot completely discontinued their plastics recycling service, and the Sanders and Flathead counties' waste management services recently ended theirs as well. In Missoula, both companies still plan to continue taking plastics, but they do implore their customers to remove lids and labels, rinse out the materials, and check to make sure they are throwing only the accepted materials into an appropriate bin, lest these services completely go away. Augusta McDonald, MTN News, Missoula.
So here's the thing, if you're using a particular service or you're using one of those transfer stations as a drop-off location for your recycling, you should contact them and find out exactly what you can and cannot recycle through those individual programs.